Hey everyone, I hope everyone is hanging in there with distance learning. So I'm going to go through these notes because I know that some people learn a little bit better with somebody explaining something out loud to them. So this is an option if you're that kind of person. This week we're going to talk about renewable energy alternatives. So renewable energy is something that's been around for a really long time, and we see examples of renewable energy every day. If you live anywhere near a lake, or if you've ever been to the lake or even the ocean, and you see a sailboat, that's an example of wind power pushing that sailboat across the water. Um, Back in the day, they used to use wind and water power to turn mills to grind things like corn and other things. So renewable energy is something that's been around for a long time, even way back in the day. And depending on certain situations when people are camping and everything, people even use renewable energy in the form of burning wood to cook food or to heat their home or their tent or their cabin or whatever they're in. So we're going to get into the nitty gritty of different kinds of renewable energy, what's good about renewable energy, what's maybe not so great about renewable energy. And so if you come up with any questions while you're watching this, please jot them down. We are going to meet this week on Thursday at 9 a.m. for a Google Meet. It is not required. It is something that is optional, but if you have questions, that would be a good time to bring those up. I shut my camera off just so my face would not block any of the content on the slides, but we'll go ahead and go through them. So why do we need alternative energy sources to begin with? We talked about non-renewable energy sources last week, things like coal, oil, natural gas, and these are things that we're using right now to generate electricity and heat our homes. So why do we need anything else? Well, the primary reason for that is fossil fuels won't last forever. We're eventually going to run out. They will not be able to be replaced in our lifetime. The next great reason is that renewables provide new jobs. We need people to design how we're going to use these renewable energy sources. We need people to build those buildings. We need people to maintain those sources. So that provides a lot of jobs, and that's good for the economy. The other thing that makes that really good for the economy is it means that our country will be less dependent on others for fuel. We won't have to be relying on oil that's being imported from other countries and things like that. For the environment, non-renewable, or excuse me, alternative energy sources are much better. It decreases air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, and that's really important. Fossil fuels currently supply 80% of the world's energy, but renewable energy use is rapidly growing. So our country and other countries are working really hard to move in the direction of alternative energy. All right, so biomass energy. So when we say the word biomass, we mean any kind of material such as wood, manure, which of course is animal poop, and grain. So anything that makes up living organisms or once came from a living organism. Biomass energy, which is energy that we get from biomass, is called biopower, and that is produced by burning biomass. So when we're burning wood, we're burning animal poop, we're burning grain, that's biopower. Biomass energy can be used for heating, cooking, lighting, vehicle fuel, or electricity generation. So basically anything that we can use fossil fuels for, we can typically use biomass energy for. We get biomass energy from solids, so things like wood, charcoal, manure, agriculture and timber waste, switchgrass, from liquids. So we have liquid biofuels. Those are things like ethanol and biodiesel. And in your activity this week, you will learn a lot more about the different kinds of ethanol and biodiesel. And then finally, gases. Methane, which they also call landfill gas, is produced by the breakdown of waste in landfills, and we can potentially harness that and burn it and use it as a form of biomass. So our little insert says, did you know wood, charcoal, and manure, I can't actually say that word, guys. You can make fun of me all day. That's fine. Supply animal poop supply 35% of the energy in developing nations and over 90% of the energy in the world's poorest nations. Benefits and costs of biomass energy. So as with most things in life, there are a lot of great things about biomass, but there's also some costs. So the benefits, there's no net change in atmospheric carbon dioxide. You remember from our study of carbon cycle that when humans burn things, and we love to burn things, it adds a lot of carbon into the carbon cycle that is not normally there. Using biomass energy can reduce that. And it can be produced by all nations. So even some of the poorer nations that are not as well developed can also use biomass. But the costs, what's bad about this? It takes away land from food crops or natural habitats. Corn is a main component in biomass. And again, you'll learn more about corn ethanol in your activity this week. But if we're using this land to grow corn for biofuel, we're not using that land to grow corn to feed people. And so that presents some problems. We also have to look at things like deforestation, soil erosion, and desertification, which means when all of the nutrient-rich soil and plants and everything is removed, it can create a desert situation, and this can result in plant biomass is harvested too rapidly. So basically, those are things that basically we need to make sure if we are using biomass that we're doing it responsibly and we're not creating a desolate wasteland in its path. Another cost of biomass energy is that large energy input is needed. It requires a lot of energy to get energy. So the energy input is just slightly less than the energy output, so it's not very efficient. And then finally, burning biomass indoors can lead to indoor air pollution. So if you're burning something that was once living in your house, it releases other chemicals and other byproducts, and it's going to make the air inside your house maybe not so palatable to breathe. So geothermal energy, this is underground heat generated by high pressure and breakdown of radioactive elements. It's usually accessed by drilling deep below ground. Steam turns turbines, generating electricity. This can be used directly by piping hot water from its source into homes and businesses. And then ground source heat pumps use naturally temperate soil a few feet underground to heat homes in winter and to cool them in summer. And this little diagram on the side here shows a ground source heat pump in the winter and summer. Geothermal energy is really not very widely used because it's not very efficient. So benefits and costs of geothermal energy. Benefits, it causes much less air pollution than fossil fuels, and it has a low greenhouse gas emission, so those are both good things. The costs of geothermal energy, not sustainable if hot groundwater is used faster than it is naturally replenished. Hot groundwater can contain pollutants that damage machines or add to pollution. It can also release some smells that are not so great. Some geothermal energy projects can trigger earthquakes. Obviously, that's not great either. And then geothermal power plants can only be built in places with easy access to geothermal energy. So basically, you would have to plan your house to be built over somewhere where there's a geothermal energy source, and sometimes that's easier than done. Alrighty, generating electricity with hydropower. So hydropower is kind of you'll hear about it in the news, is this kind of great and innovative new way to generate power, and it is, but again, there's pros and cons to everything. So hydropower is generated by turbines turned by moving water. There are two basic approaches to this. So either water flows through a dam and pushes turbines, or naturally flowing water is diverted through turbines. Naturally flowing water can lead to a variable supply of electricity. So basically we aren't guaranteed a steady flow of water. Sometimes when water is flowing naturally, if there's rain, it's going to cause it to flow more quickly. If there's not rain, it's going to flow more slowly. And so you can think about if you were generating electricity by pedaling on a bicycle, if you pedaled slowly, electricity would not be, if you had a bulb connected, the bulb would not be as bright. If you started pedaling really fast, the bulb would be brighter. The same is kind of true with flowing water. So it's not really a great reliable source of electricity at a steady pace. Dams provide constant electricity, but they can disturb natural habitats. So basically you have to destroy a lot of natural habitat to set these things up, and that has a lot of environmental consequences. Benefits and costs of hydropower. So benefits, it is completely renewable. There is no air pollution or greenhouse gas emissions, and it yields relatively cheap electricity. And cheap is good, especially for developing nations. The costs, however, is that dams alter ecosystems and affect organisms, especially fish. Fish are very reliant on their natural paths of migration for things like feeding and breeding, and so when we're building dams, we can really mess that up for them. Dams also trap soil enriching silt, preventing it from reaching downstream. And building dams and reservoirs can displace people. So a lot of times if there is an area where they want to insert a dam, sometimes there are people that have houses there. And those people are relocated sometimes willingly and sometimes not so willingly. Tidal energy. So tidal, a word there, tide, you think of the ocean. And this is electricity generated by the flow of ocean water as tides go in and out. Tidal waters push turbines in a dam, and so turbines are things that turn around and generate electricity. The best places to harness tidal energy have big differences in the heights of high tide and low tide. So basically, if there's not a big difference between high tide and low tide, that's not going to be a great place to set up for tidal energy because there needs to be a big difference for them to realize that energy potential. It generates little to no pollution, so that's good. but shore ecosystems can be negatively affected and very few locations are currently suitable. Thermal energy from the ocean. So we know that the ocean absorbs solar energy and stores it as heat. Ocean Thermal Energy Conservation, or OTEC, converts heat energy in the ocean to electricity. So warm ocean water is used to boil liquids with very low boiling points, and that generates vapors that can spin turbines. OTEC technology is currently under development. No power plants use this method today. It is incredibly inefficient, and I don't know that we will ever get to a point where we're using this energy, but it's important that we research all of the options. Harnessing solar energy for heat. So passive solar heating. Most of us have probably seen solar panels on a house, and so that's a kind of solar energy. So let's explore a couple of different kinds. So passive solar heating is designing a building to efficiently capture, store, and distribute the sun's energy. Can be used to heat homes and businesses. Active solar heating uses technologies such as solar panels to capture, store, and distribute the sun's energy. So basically, passive solar heating, you can kind of think about, some of you may have what's called a sun porch on your house. And that may be build a room off of your house that is maybe not heated or cooled through your heating or cooling system, but it has great big windows. And so you notice when you go in there, it's really warm in there, almost like a greenhouse. A lot of people, sometimes who have sun porches, keep a lot of plants out there for that reason, because it's nice and moist and hot, and it's a great place for a plant to live. So that would be an example of passive solar heating. Active solar heating, if people have solar panels on their house, that's probably what's going on there. And so did you know greenhouses, thick window drapes, and south-facing windows are all passive solar energy devices? Harnessing solar energy to make electricity. So we've got a diagram off to the side here. Don't be overwhelmed by the diagram. This is just to kind of give you a little taste. We're not going to really get too hung up on this. Something called photovoltaic cells. That is a fancy word for solar panels. Those convert solar energy directly into electricity. By concentrating solar power, which is things like using mirrors to focus the sun's rays on a vessel containing fluid, creates steam to push turbines and generate electricity. So basically, we're using the power of the sun to heat liquid, and the steam that comes off of that liquid is going to spin a turbine, and anytime we're spinning a turbine, we have an opportunity to generate electricity. So just like everything else, we have benefits and costs of solar power. The benefits, it's inexhaustible. We're not going to run out of sun. It's clean. There's no air or water pollution produced during operation. Low maintenance devices. Once you have those solar panels installed, you don't have to do a whole lot else. And new jobs to make solar devices. This is important. We need people to build the solar panels, to install them, to maintain them. New jobs is always a good thing for the economy. Costs. There's some pollution during manufacture. So we have to mine some of the materials to make solar panels, and therefore they're not quite as green as people think they are. Many regions of the country aren't sunny enough. We have plentiful sunshine here in Georgia, especially in the summertime, but there's certainly some regions in the country that are not sunny enough. Think of places like Seattle. I forget what the statistic is, but it rains something like 6 out of every 7 days in Seattle. So therefore, it wouldn't really be practical to put solar panels on your house if you lived in Seattle. The devices are also really expensive. So you may get tricked into thinking, okay, well, if I put solar panels on my house, then I'll never have to pay for electricity. Well, you have to think about what the initial cost of the solar panel is and divide that over the period of time that you're reaping those benefits. It's going to take a really long time of not paying for electricity to pay off those solar panels. So they are quite expensive. Using wind to make electricity. So some of us, or most of us, have probably seen a windmill in a field as you were driving along with your parents if you're going on a trip somewhere. Excuse me. So wind turbines or windmills convert wind's kinetic energy to electrical energy. Wind turbines can be placed on land or offshore, and turbines can be solitary or built in groups called wind farms. So when you see a lot of windmills all together, that's called a wind farm. Average wind speeds are 20% faster offshore than on land. So that means when we put windmills in places like the ocean, we're going to generate a lot more wind electricity than we would on land. The problem with that is those can be difficult to maintain, and so therefore it's easier to put them on land. Benefits and costs of wind power. The benefits, there's no pollution or greenhouse gases produced during operation. Under good wind conditions, it produces far more energy than it uses, which is good. We always want the amount of energy that we're getting from a process to outweigh the amount of energy that we're putting in to get it. Another benefit is that they're relatively cheap to operate. Once they're up there, they don't really require a lot of maintenance, and so they're cheap to operate. Notice that it's cheap to operate and not cheap to build. So this brings us down to our costs. They have high startup costs. They are extremely expensive to build. Another cost is that winds can be unpredictable. So everything is well and good as long as we're having a lot of wind, but if we go through a period where there isn't a lot of wind, then those wind turbines aren't really going to help us much. The fastest winds are often not near population centers. So you have to think about the cost of transporting that energy across a long geographical um, expanse. We're gonna lose energy along that process. Communities complain about the looks and noise of wind farms. They're not particularly good to look at, especially if it's in your backyard. That really wouldn't be a great view. And they can be harmful to birds and bats. They really mess with bats. Their echolocation, they get a picture of their surrounding area through sonar, and so wind turbines can really mess them up, and it can be harmful to birds because they either try to nest on them and then the wind turbine turns, or they fly into them and they can get injured. Hydrogen, and so we have H2 here because hydrogen, when it's considered as a fuel source, that's two hydrogen atoms that are stuck together. That's what H2 indicates. And that can be combusted, meaning burned, and produce heat with just water as a byproduct. On Earth, hydrogen in its, well, yes, elemental hydrogen is commonly found in compounds such as water, though it's rare in its elemental form, H2 gas. H2 can be produced by breaking down water, so which is H2O. You would break the oxygen atom off, and then you would just have H2. Or it can also be from methane. Methane is a carbon atom surrounded by 4 hydrogen atoms. So you kind of pluck 2 of those hydrogen atoms off, and then you have that hydrogen H2 as a fuel source. This is a new technology. It involves using green algae to produce H2 from the water. That's something that you will be researching more in this week's assignment, so I won't say too much about that. The benefits and costs of this hydrogen as a fuel source. Benefits: there is an inexhaustible supply of hydrogen. As you know, matter cannot be created or destroyed. That includes atoms. We will always have the same number of atoms of hydrogen as when we started, so we're not going to ever run out of them. Few greenhouse gases or pollutants, which is good. Water and heat might be the only byproducts, which is excellent. We don't have to worry about any harmful chemicals, and it can be stored and transported really easily. The costs: hydrolysis, which is the process of splitting water to generate these H2 molecules, is really expensive. And breaking down methane yields carbon dioxide. Both require energy from an outside source, so it's not really very efficient. And the other cost is that H2 gas must be compressed if used for vehicle fuel, and that can be tricky and also expensive. Finally, please do not let this diagram overwhelm you. We're just touching on this. So this is an example of a fuel cell. And so in this diagram, we have hydrogen and oxygen reacting to form water, producing electricity in the fuel cell's electrodes. The byproducts of this are water vapor and heat. We can use this to power vehicles or power plants, and it can provide electricity to places off-grid or unreachable by conventional power companies. So again, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on fuel cells. If this is something that interests you, I encourage you to look them up on the internet. They are really fascinating. But again, don't be overwhelmed by the diagram. We're not going to quiz you on that or anything. We just wanted to touch on it so you would be exposed. So that's the end of our lecture for this week on the different kinds of the different kinds of renewable energy sources. If you're curious about more, you want to see more videos or do some activities, please check out the Georgia Virtual module. They do a wonderful job of covering different kinds of renewable energy. Again, if you have any questions, please write them down. I would love to answer them during our Google Meet on Thursday. And if you're not able to attend, please feel free to shoot me an email. We can always set up a private Google Meet where we can talk, and I can walk you through anything. Please make sure that you review the assignments for this week and that you understand them so that you're able to ask me any questions in a timely manner. I hope that you have a great week, and I hope that we will see each other face to face next week.